it gives me it really gives me immense pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Ashutosh Vatsayan. So, Dr. Ashutosh, he has done his BDS from Punjab, and he has done his 1 second. He has passed his BDS from Punjab, and then he has done his MDS from our very prestigious Regional Dental College, Guwahati. He then did his clinical fellowship in head and neck oncology and reconstruction from SGC Cancer Center, Ahmedabad. He has also been awarded FHNO Travel Fellowship from Tata Memorial Center, Mumbai. His special interest includes maxillofacial, head and neck oncology and reconstruction, including microvascular surgery. He has got 13 peer-reviewed publications in national and international journals, and is an invited faculty at national conferences and workshops. So Ashutosh, it was just, we are working very closely in our Nemcare Super Specialty Hospital, and very recently we were discussing on the very important topic of mucormycosis, which has been already, although it is a very rare disease, it was a rare disease, but nowadays it is very much in the headlines. We all know why, but still, Ashutosh was also mentioning that nowadays we might encounter cases in our dental clinic also. And then only suddenly we said, okay, why don't you give a talk? And he agreed to that. Thank you so much, Ashutosh. I am very sure our respected senior doctors, my fellow colleagues, junior doctors, my students, I think students have joined from Regional Dental College, from Dibrugarh Dental College, I think from Silchar also students have joined. I am pretty sure all our dental surgeons, everyone will be very much benefited from the lecture you are going to present today. So looking forward, and I also, on my behalf, welcome Dr. Ravinder Singh. Kind enough of you, sir, to join this session today. We will be very much delighted to hear from you after the session. We'd like to hear some words from you too after Dr. Ashutosh completes his talk. And I would also like to request all our participants who have joined the session to whatever queries or questions they have, to put it in the chat box, so that after the session is complete, I will forward the session questions to Dr. Ashutosh, and he'll be very much happy to answer all the queries. I also here can see Dr. Jogeshwar Burman, very much active secretary, and I really welcome you, Jogeshwar also, and all the senior doctors and everybody inside the session. Thank you so much, and over to you, Ashutosh.
Okay, I'll just share the screen first, then I'll start off with that. I hope I'm audible and the screen is visible.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Very warm good evening to all of you. Thank you so much, Dr. Navneeta ma'am, for the excellent introduction. I would first like to thank the Indian Dental Association State Assam branch, all the office bearers who were very much interested in this topic and have given me an opportunity to present on this topic. And I would also like to thank Dr. Ravinder Singh, the president of the IDEA, for joining this meeting. And very good evening to all the fellow participants, dental surgeons, and all the students. I am Dr. Ashutosh, and I am a consultant maxillofacial and oral cancer reconstructive surgeon, as ma'am has elaborated. We work over here in the Nemcare Super Specialty Hospital in Guwahati. We have a dedicated OMFS unit, and I tend to work exclusively in the benign and the malignant diseases of the maxillofacial and the oral region. I have my colleague, Dr. P.S. Chakrabarti, and we work as a team at Nemcare Hospital. So the past 2 years have been, we have been dealing with a war. This is the war of the pandemic of the COVID. And this war is won with number of battles at each step. So we have a new battle that's we have to face at the moment. And you must have seen with the media and everywhere, there's a kind of a lot of hype and a lot of scariness around it, which is called the black fungus or the mucormycosis. So it is a battle within a war, within the war of this pandemic. So to start off, I would just briefly outline what are the contents through which we are going to discuss, because we have mostly have dental surgeons with us who have joined this meeting. I will try to make it as brief as possible, as easy to understand as possible, so that this will help us to diagnose the cases and preempt the occurrence of mucormycosis in case of the patients. So we'll be covering this within the topics under the garb of the introduction, the risk factors, the pathogenesis, how does this occur, the various types, the diagnosis, what is the way to do a diagnosis of mucormycosis, as well as the management. So it's been rightly being called the epidemic of tragic promotions. So why so much hue and cry around this mucormycosis? See, according to the Western concept, if 2 or more cases of mucor occur within a short time period, then it should be investigated as a probable epidemic. But when we take the case of India, over the last few months, we have recorded somewhere around 8,000 cases. If you see the chart on the right, let me just showing with the pointer. If you see this chart on the right, this is the data that was released by the Ministry of Health on 20th of May when it declared that it is an epidemic. So if you look at the states which have been highlighted in blue, such as Gujarat, Maharashtra, they have more than 2,000 cases. And I bet I tell you, these is an underreported number, because these are mostly the numbers that have been reported from the government institutes. That is very high. Thankfully, within this part of India, the northeastern part of India, the states which have been highlighted in the red box, Arunachal, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, we've not seen any case. We've not seen any case because maybe the management of the COVID has been better, or we are waiting for an impending doom. The cases are about to surge. Only Tripura has recorded one case. In the last 10 days, Assam did record one case, but the patient could not survive. So to start off first, we'll first discuss what is mucormycosis. Just for theoretical purpose, a brief introduction. It was earlier called phycomycosis or zygomycosis, described by Paltov in 1885. So it's not a new disease. It has existed since time immemorial, but later was coined mucormycosis in 1957. These fungi are ubiquitous. That means they're present everywhere around us. They're present in the air, they are in the soil, the food that we eat, all the decaying material that exists around us. And if we talk about they can be acquired either by inhalation as well as direct inoculation. For example, we have a trauma and the soil is there on our hand. We do not clean it. So there's a chance we might have an inoculation of the fungi. So everybody is exposed. We are breathing the air. The fungi spores are there in the air. So everyone is exposed but rarely infected. A healthy person like any one of us would have this present in the nasal mucosa, but only as a commensal. It's not dangerous in that sense. But because of the present situation, it has become life-threatening with a mortality of 50 to 80% and 100% in case of the disseminated cases where it spreads to the entire body. So briefly discussing its classification under the fungi, they fall under the fungi. This is Zygomycota phylum and the order Mucorales, and they have a family, the Mucoracea. When the Absidia, Mucorrhizopus are different types of the species that may exist of the mucormycosis, most common being the Rhizopus as well as the Mucor. If I have to talk more general sense, we see that when the bread is kept outside, there is a black mold that grows onto it after a few days, especially when it approaches its expiry period. That is what a mucormycosis is. So who are at risk? So we have to analyze that who are the people who are at risk, because as I told, it's not present in a healthy individual. It can occur only in those people who are susceptible to risk. So what are the risk factors? So mostly seen in case of the immunocompromised patient. So these immunocompromised patients can be people who are suffering with HIV, people who are geriatric patients who have an age greater than 60 years of age, uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. Now, I'll be discussing further why it is more common in case of people who have diabetes mellitus. Immunosuppression by steroids. So steroid use has come out more common in the second wave of the pandemic. People who have prolonged ICU stay, people who have comorbidities, such as post-organ transplantation, have received an organ transplant, or people with hematological malignancy, as well as people with severe trauma or burns. So recently, why this has gained more attention, it is being seen a lot, especially in post-COVID patients. So these are the risk factors. If we can judge and analyze the risk factors in any patient we are seeing, we will be able to predict or detect early the mucormycosis. So before we go into the stage, we must understand the pathogenesis. So basically what happens, these are the spores. As I told, they're present everywhere around us, around the air, the soil, the water. So the spores, they are inhaled through the nose to the nostrils, and as a result, they may get deposited in the nasal mucosa or may reach into the lungs. Or it may occur by the direct inoculation because of a trauma onto the skin. As a result, the spores may enter. So once enter the body, as I told, in a healthy individual, we have the macrophages as well as the neutrophils. They have the most important role to phagocytose these conidia. But people, this function of the macrophages and the neutrophils can be inhibited by the glucocorticoids, which is the steroids, and as well as people who have neutropenia, that is the number of the neutrophils is less, especially in COVID patients. So as a result, the functioning of the neutrophils and the macrophages is hampered. Okay. At the same time, people who have uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, people who are suffering from COVID or post-COVID, they seem to have an increase in the iron content in the body. See, what happens up is people who are diabetic, there is a stage which leads to acidosis. As a result of this acidosis, the iron content in the body increases. In a normal individual, there is no free iron. Iron is being utilized by the serum for binding with the transferrin. But in people who are diabetic, people who have these immunocompromised state, people who are post-COVID, the iron is increased in the body, iron load. As a result, this iron acts as a buffer for these mucormycosis spores to proliferate, and thus they further proliferate by three mechanisms. One is angioinvasion. Angioinvasion means that penetrate into the blood vessels of a body. As a result of the angioinvasion, that further leads to thrombosis. Thrombosis leads to infarct, as well as tissue necrosis. This is one of the hallmark sign of these mucormycosis, the angioinvasive growth, further leading to thrombosis and necrosis. And as a result, when that occurs, it leads to dissemination. That is, it leads to the spread throughout the body, and that is when it turns fatal. So mucor in India. So why mucor cases is being seen a lot in India, not in the West? It is 50, 60 times higher as compared to the Western countries. The main reason being the uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. India, lifestyle diseases are something that are seen quite common in India, and diabetes mellitus is the one that is most common over here, as compared to other hematological malignancies or organ transplant patients which are seen in the West. So because of this uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, the number of cases in India is quite high. So briefly discussing types of mucormycosis, it can be cutaneous, which involves the skin. It can be rhinocerebral mucormycosis. Rhino means the nose, cerebral means the brain. So we normally use a cerebral mucormycosis. Third being the pulmonary mucormycosis, gastrointestinal mucormycosis, and the disseminated mucormycosis. For the people who have joined me, we will be discussing a lot in detail about this rhinocerebral mucormycosis, because the dental surgeons, they have a very important role in diagnosing these patients, preempting whether they can be chance of a mucormycosis in a patient. So, so why in COVID patients we are seeing that this is quite a lot? As I said earlier, COVID patients, they will have lymphopenia or neutropenia. The CD4 and the CD8 cells are naturally decreased. He is in an immunocompromised state. As a result, they are predisposed to occurrence of mycosis. Uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, as I told you, there are a number of factors. It hampers the functioning of the neutrophils. It also hampers, leads to increase in the iron overload. As a result, there's a chance as a risk factor. Injudicious use of the steroids, again, they have, because excessive application of what happens, person who was not diabetic earlier, because the use of the steroid has been found recently, especially the use has been more during the second wave of the COVID. As a result, the injudicious use of the steroids makes a person diabetic, also hampers with the phagocytic action of the neutrophils. As a result, the chances of mucormycosis is very high. Another risk factor is the oxygen therapy. Now, see, within this, there are a number of multiple factors. People are using a lot of oxygen concentrators at home. So whether the oxygen concentrators they use a humidifier or not is a big issue. Whether the water that has been used is sterile or not is another big issue. The oxygen that is being supplied in hospitals, because there was a recent shortage of the oxygen that was pan India present. Now the oxygen is being collected from the industries and it is being converted into medical grade oxygen. So people also hypothesize that there is a kind of a lack in this conversion of the industrial to the medical oxygen. And as a result, this could be one of the main causes. The tankers that are used to transport this oxygen are basically liquid nitrogen tankers. So these liquid nitrogen tankers can lead to an increase in the fungal infection. A recent article was seen from US which shows zinc supplement might have an association with the fungal growth, but it's not still a proven hypothesis. But since most people, when they have asymptomatic patients, they tend to take a lot of zinc supplements, could be an association with mucormycosis. Now, this point is very important, the overuse of steam inhalation. There have been videos circulating people taking steams at home. People have set up steam bars where people can go pay 10 rupees and get the steam and everything. Now, over judicious use of the steam is also being interpreted as an important factor which is causing this mucormycosis. What happens? The temperature is not controlled. Excessive use of the steam might cause a damage to the nasal mucosa. As a result, these spores they tend to proliferate more. So injudicious use of the steam inhalation is also one of the important factors. And of course, the unhygienic face mask might lead to the spores proliferating in the face mask. So this summarizes why it is being associated and seen more, because in case of the COVID, it is not just the COVID which is causing the mucormycosis. There are other risk factors which are centered around this COVID, which is causing these mucormycosis to occur. So now, if we have to talk about the stages of this rhinocerebral mucormycosis, the stage 1 is the infection of the nasal mucosa or the sinuses that occurs. So at this stage, if it is diagnosed at the right time, we will be seeing what all symptoms are present in case of the patient. Then it can be cured at a very early stage. From here, the infection might go into the oral cavity, involve the maxillary bones, or it may take an upward descent and involve the stage 2, which is the orbital involvement, which might involve cause an orbital apex syndrome or superior orbital fissure syndrome. That is, it involves the nerves, the optic nerve, as well as the third, fourth, fifth, as a sixth cranial nerve. So as a result, because of the involvement of these nerves, it hampers with the movement of the eye. And this is the stage 2, and further may progress to lead into this cerebral involvement by one of the roots, such as the ophthalmic artery or superior orbital fissure or the cribriform plate. And as a result, so when it reaches the cerebral involvement, it becomes dreadful. We need a multidisciplinary team approach to manage such a case, which is stage 3. So now for our dental surgeon friends, what are the clinical presentations? So how do we diagnose it? See, when a patient can be either in the post-COVID stage, or maybe a normal individual who comes who doesn't give you the history that he's had COVID because the person was asymptomatic. Person can have fever. Now, fever is not present in all the individuals, but it can be one of the presenting symptoms. The second is the headache. Headache is a very common symptom that is normally seen in case of the patients. Facial swelling or pain. As dental surgeons, we will have lot of people, these people who will come with the facial swelling. Pain and redness around the eyes or the nose. They will also have a nasal discharge and obstruction. This nasal discharge, the discharge that is present can be a little thickened, and with the passage of time, this discharge may become blackish in color. So these are some of the initial clinical presentation one must be very much aware of and have a suspicion for mucormycosis, provided the patient also has the risk factors associated, such as post-COVID, as well as the other diabetes mellitus or any immunocompromised stage. So these are the initial symptoms. If these initial symptoms are not paid attention to, it can advance, and person can show advanced symptom as well. So within these advanced symptoms, they can be oral, can be sinonasal, orbital, as well as the cranial. So I'll be discussing briefly the oral symptoms because most of these patients will come to a dental clinic with problems. So we must be very well aware what are the symptoms we must keep in mind and which will help in the diagnosis of mucormycosis. So first symptom is the swollen gums with pus discharge. So I want to elaborate this picture that you see on the top right. On a normal day, this would look like the teeth they have having some carious involvement. As a result, the person has a pus. There is a pus that is coming. The gums are swollen. So a picture was sent to me by my colleague from Gujarat because the number of cases are huge over there. So as a result, the patient was subjected to an RCT treatment. So the pitfall in this thing was the patient's history was not taken into account. He was a post-COVID patient and was having uncomplicated diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes. So that should be taken into account. The history of the patient as well as the risk factors is very important, especially during this pandemic time. The patient can also have an unexplained tooth mobility or an upper jaw mobility. As you can see in the video that the entire tooth is mobile as well as the jaw is mobile. So there can be palatal swelling may be present as well as discoloration. This discoloration can be blackish color. This blackish is mainly because, as I told, this mucormycosis, pathogenesis, it goes by angioinvasion. That means it goes into the blood vessels and causes the thrombosis. So as a result, there will be swelling as well as discoloration. A palatal ulcer. One of the main things is it causes necrosis of the bone first, followed by the creation of ulcer. In most of the other cases, the ulcer appears first, then is the progression of the disease. But it's retrograde in case of mucormycosis. There is a bone, when an ulcer is formed, the bone has already undergone necrosis. Or they may be present of an HR, the blackish color area. This bone has undergone completely necrosis. So these oral manifestations must be borne very nicely in mind, especially the first one, the swollen gums with the pus discharge, because we will have a lot of patients who will come with swollen gums with pus discharge, but they will not have an active lesion within the tooth. So in such cases, we have to ask the history of the patient. Did he have COVID or not? Did he even have one day where he felt that he was not comfortable? Does he have any risk factor associated with it? Only then we must proceed with the rightful and the justful treatment. Similarly, there can be sinonasal symptoms as well. ENT doctor is very helpful in diagnosis of a sinonasal symptom, which is very easily diagnosed with the help of a nasal endoscope. Person having a discharge. And when we see on endoscope, person have black turbinates along with nasal septal perforation, they may be present. But the orbital symptoms, they, as we have seen in the stage 2 of the disease, is when the disease from the nasal mucosa goes in an ascending direction. The person may have orbital swellitis, that is a swelling which is present around the eye. There may be ptosis, that is the drooping of the upper eyelid. Chemosis and the congestion which is seen in the eye, along with proptosis, which is the bulging of the eye. There may be ophthalmoplegia, pain around the area, as well as difficulty in movement of the eye, which eventually will involve the optic nerve and lead to blindness in case of the patient. So these are some of the signs we must be well aware when we are seeing a patient in our dental clinic. But if the disease is kept unchecked, it might lead to involvement of the soft tissue. So as a result, so you can see on the left side, there is this patient who had the entire skin of the cheek that was involved. And this has been sent to by my friend from Gujarat. We'll be discussing this case, what was the treatment that was given in this patient. So this is mainly where the angioinvasion occurs. It causes the involved further thrombosis as well as necrosis of the soft tissue. So radiographic feature, not elaborating much. You have a patient like this who comes with these symptoms, go ahead, give a CT scan. If a facility for an MRI is available, it is much better because the involvement of the soft tissue is first. The MRI is the gold standard, which in my opinion, that is recommended for people with mucormycosis. But CT scan will also give us good results. We have different classification. We have the T1 and the T2 weighted images. But just remember, this needs to be given with contrast. Any investigation should be given with contrast in case of the patients. There are a number of pathognomic signs which can be seen within this radiographic examination that will give us an indication whether the person is suffering from mucormycosis or not. For example, the black turbinate sign, what happens in normal MRI, it generally appears a little enhanced, but here, because of the necrosis that has undergone, the turbinates, they will not appear as enhanced, they will be ischemic, and there'll be a black turbinate sign along with the pansinusitis that may be present. So if you have the MRI facility available, in case of a doubtful patient, go with an MRI with contrast. No MRI facility available, CT scan with contrast is a must in case of patient who shows any of the symptoms discussed further, should be sent without delay. And OPG is not recommended. That will not give us any indication, because the first line of investigation that we normally give is an OPG. That is generally not recommended and will not help in the diagnosis. So once we have seen a patient that the patient is having all these symptoms, the most important aspect comes in the diagnosis is to go for a culture and biopsy. So for a culture, what I would recommend is when you have a patient who shows any kind of discharge, a swelling with a discharging sinus, you should always collect two tissues. One tissue that will be used for direct microscopy, and the second tissue which will be used for culture and histopathological examination. So both these can be sent in sterile containers. If there is a discharge that is present, that can be collected with the help of a swab, such as a nasal swab or a pus discharge from the oral cavity, that can be sent as well. But always send it. This is a recommendation after discussion with the microbiologist. Normally what happens is when we take a biopsy specimen, we normally put it up in case of a formalin solution, but not in this case, because we have to see the fungi that grows. So this should be sent in two separate containers. Normally this tissue culture is mounted on a potassium hydroxide mount, but that will be managed by the microbiologist. So once the two specimens are sent, one specimen that is mounted onto a potassium hydroxide mount can be seen under direct microscopy. So this will give us very results. So because the time is an important factor in diagnosing these cases. So the first specimen by direct microscopy will show large branching non-septate hyphae, which are 90 degrees. So this will be the hyphae which a pathognomic sign is present at 90 degree, and they are mostly do not have any septa within this hyphae. The second specimen that is sent will be used to grow in case of a culture, the dextrose agar culture that is present. Normally within 24 hours at 30 degrees C, we will have a good growth that will be present and help us in case of the diagnosis. The confirmation is, of course, by the histopathological examination, because there is no blood parameters that we can do. We do for a blood parameter that will come to know that the person is having mucormycosis. So histopathology still becomes the gold standard in case of the diagnosis, but generally takes a little time for the assessment. Frozen section, of course, we normally use in surgeries, gives us a good, faster means of assessment, but it's not available everywhere. The most important feature is differentiating an aspergillus from a mucormycosis. So mucormycete will, as I told you, the hyphae, they are normally present at 90-degree angle, whereas in case of the aspergillosis, they will have a 45-degree angle. So that is the main differentiation. And mucormycosis generally without any septa, there is no septa present over here. Whereas in case of the aspergillus, they will have septa over here that is present within the hyphae. So this is the requirement that is histopathologists will always see and will help in the confirmatory diagnosis of a mucormycosis. So after discussing this, once we have the diagnosis in hand, we need to understand the management. The management is a multidisciplinary team approach. Any day it has to be managed in a hospital setting, cannot be managed by one individual. You see, two teams are involved, each having a subset of specialists who will manage this case. The medical team, which will consist of the medicine specialist or the endocrinologist, to take care of the diabetes of the patient, the uncontrolled diabetes mellitus. The pulmonary medicine specialist to look for the changes within the lungs, because the patients, most of these patients are mostly post-COVID. The neurologist, because there is a cerebral extension that may be present. A microbiologist and the pathologist for the diagnosis. The paramedical and the nursing staff. The surgical team consists of the anesthetists, the ENT specialists for examination within the nasal mucosa, as well as because the endoscopic, because the approach for the treatment is can include open surgery as well as endoscopic and an open surgery, that is a combined approach. We need an ophthalmologist, The dentists, of course, they have the most important role regarding the diagnosis of the patient, along with the surgeon, the maxillofacial or the plastic surgeons, for the treatment of the involvement of the maxilla, as well as the neurosurgeons when the disease extension is there into the brain. So it's a combined approach and should be managed under hospital setting. So what is the rationale of the treatment? We have the diagnosis in hand. We have identified that a person has mucormycosis. So what is the rationale? The rationale is early clinical laboratory diagnosis, of course, aggressive surgical debridement. So the first line of approach is actually not just a patient comes to us, we give him an antifungal drug. That is not the line of treatment. First step is actually doing an aggressive surgical debridement. And why it is to be done, I'll be discussing within the advantages of the surgery. Once that is a timely intervention of the antifungal drug should be given. There should be a reverse of the immunosuppression. And that is why the medicine specialist or the endocrinologist will be involved, along with the control of the underlying morbidity. So surgical debridement is very important because it helps in the removal of the necrosed tissue. When we take out this necrosed tissue, we cause the debulking of the infected tissue. Most of the blood vessels in those regions are actually destroyed. So as a result, any antifungal drug given will not act in that area. So we will go for the removal of the necrosed tissue. And once that is done, we'll start on the antifungal drug therapy, which helps us to act on the decrease the load. And thus these medicines work better. And of course, for establishing a histopathological examination. So alone surgery has been found to have a success rate of only 57% as compared to 70% success rate when we combine the modalities of surgical debridement plus an antifungal treatment. So here I want to show you some cases. What are the pitfalls that were done and how they were actually managed, and what is the extent of the involvement of mucormycosis, how dreadful this disease can be. So special thanks to my colleague, Dr. Yatin from Gujarat. We have worked together and he was kind enough to send me these pictures. And you believe it or not, the amount of cases they are doing of mucormycosis is 2 before breakfast, 2 before lunch, and 2 after before dinner. That is the extent of the involvement of the disease. So he was kind enough to send me these pictures. If you look on the picture on the left, so this is bone was not visible from the sense. The pitfall that happened in the initial was this patient went to a dental surgeon who with mobile teeth. And the first thing that was done was the extraction of the teeth without any investigations or taking a proper history. So that's when the patient reported to my colleague with this necrotic bone. And since he's been doing it since so long, since the last few months, the first moment he saw, he suspected to be a mucormycosis. He took the history of the patient. Patient was having uncontrolled diabetes. Patient had a history of COVID. So as you can see in the CT scan, you can see destruction of the bone that is present, the maxillary as well as the alveolar, as well as the palate gone. So then he was subjected to surgery. The entire maxilla, as you can see in these photographs, almost like an infrastructure maxillectomy was done. And the special thing that they do is they locally pack this area with the amphotericin. The amphotericin is soaked in a gauze and it's locally kept in this area for 5 minutes to act locally as well. And then the closure was formed with the help of buccal fat pad. This is the removed specimen. Almost half of the entire maxilla is almost removed. And this is a completely healed defect at 4 months follow-up. I want to show you another case. I had showed you this picture earlier as well as involvement of the soft tissue necrosis in case of the patient. Similar history, diabetic, post-COVID. You can see there is an involvement in the maxilla as well as involvement in the extracorneal compartment. Thankfully, they were able to preserve the eyeball in such a patient, but they had to remove the maxillary portion, preserving the lower plate. And this is the closure that was performed simultaneously by advancement of the flap. Some patients not so lucky, presenting late as a complication. See, there is not much visible, or only there are the features that we had discussed of the orbital area. The patient has a ptosis that is present. There is proptosis. There is a orbital cellulitis. Ophthalmoplegia was done. Not so lucky, involvement of the entire nerves as well as the optic nerve. So this patient to undergo orbital exenteration along with the removal of the maxilla. So you can see the eyeball that is being removed over here. So this is the extent, and it's not just unilateral involvement. The disease can have a bilateral involvement as well. So it's very important that we diagnose it up at the right time And that is what my take home message is going to be at the end as well. And like, we should be monitoring such patients. So apart from the surgery, the antifungal drug therapy is also very important. Amphotericin B node is the drug of the choice, which is highly effective against mucormycosis. If patient has some toxicity to amphotericin B, then we can look for the triazole, that is the posaconazole or the isavuconazole. But these are expensive medications. They are not readily available because the use was not there earlier. The use has come now, and it's an epidemic. The number of cases are rising a lot. So, if we discuss about the recommendation that is given by the Fungal Infection Study Forum, there is no prophylaxis that is generally recommended. There is a new thing that is being said that people who are on steroid therapy for greater than 3 weeks, who have been on ventilatory support for more than 3 weeks, or have uncontrolled diabetes mellitus post COVID for more than 3 weeks, they should be put on antifungal prophylaxis, but generally not recommended. So within this treatment strategy, the first drug of choice is, of course, the amphotericin B, and that too the lipid formulation of the amphotericin B, the liposomal formulation, because it is less nephrotoxic. Less nephrotoxic is the one that is preferred. The recommended dose is 5 milligram per kg per day for 3 to 6 weeks. It has a very extensive long duration of treatment that is there. The advantage of this lipid formulation, apart from being it is less nephrotoxic, is because of its lipid formulation, it can cross the blood-brain barrier. So in case of CNS infection, it can be used, but the dose is increased to 10 milligram per kg per day. And of course, the parameters should be monitored. In case it is not available, the lipid formulation, then we can go with the amphotericin B deoxycholate. The dose is less, which is 1 milligram per kg per day for 3 to 6 weeks. In case both of these medications are not available, then we can go with the injectable form of the isavuconazole or the posaconazole, which is given to the individuals. Once the therapy, the initial phase of the treatment is managed, the disease is stable. After 3 to 6 weeks, we must put the patient on tablet form of isavuconazole, osaconazole, isavuconazole tablet 200 milligram thrice daily for 1 or 2 days, followed by 200 milligram per day for 3 to 6 months. And similar is for posaconazole, which has initial loading doses 300 milligram twice daily on day 1, followed by 300 milligram per day for 3 to 6 months. So the duration of the treatment of the antifungal therapy is quite long, and that is, it explains the dreadful nature of the disease. Apart from the surgery and the antifungal drug therapy, there are other adjunct therapies. They are not used routinely, but we must discuss them. There is the iron chelating agents, as we had discussed. This iron acts as the buffer for them to proliferate more. So we can reduce this iron load, especially in blood transfusion patients where the iron load may be very high. So it is the same as applicable to people who are post-COVID showing mucormycosis. Augmentation of the host responses, people who have neutropenia, the granulocyte colony stimulating factor or the interferon therapy can be used. Hyperbaric oxygen, it is used extensively in people who have osteoradionecrosis. So its utility is also being discussed in mucormycosis. However, these are just adjunct therapies. These are not the primary therapies. So we have discussed the brief outline. So the take-home message I want to bring forward to you is that this rhino-orbitocerebral mycosis can be prevented. There should be close monitoring of the blood sugar in case of the people, especially the post-COVID patient. Judicious and supervised use of the steroids and the antibiotics. Strict aseptic use of the oxygen. Personal and environmental hygiene. Barrier masks should be used covering the nose and the mouth. High index of suspicion or alertness should be there for mucor signs and symptoms, especially in the COVID and the post-COVID patients. In a couple of hospitals, what they have done is they made it a protocol. Any COVID patient who is discharged will have to compulsory undergo for routine checkup after 15 days of the home isolation. When come back, a nasal endoscopy is must, as well as a dental checkup is a must for these patients. A number of hospitals have started including the program for people who are risk factors. So as a result, we have to be very cautious in case of the immunocompromised patients. Early diagnosis should be done, and multidisciplinary team approach is very, very important. Surgery is essential in most of the cases. along with the antifungal medication. One should not be scared of surgery. That is the only way to curb this disease. If it is not come, the timely intervention is not there, this disease might progress into disseminated form where fatality is 100%. And do not panic, as early diagnosis, if done, leads to good results. Thank you so much for being patient listener.